Today I'm going to talk about authentic religion versus inauthentic religion. It's a very thin line. So an authentic religion will have some weight to it. Something like the Augsburg Confession, the 39 Articles of Religion, the Dogma, or the Anabaptist theology, the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed, the Athanasian Creed. These are all solid foundations for true religion. False religion, it's just cultish. You know it when this person is the sole voice of all of our theology. There's no real collaboration. So to give you an example, the Augsburg Confession is the official confession of the Lutheran Church. But Martin Luther had nothing to do with it and didn't know anything about it. It was created by his followers. Same thing with the 39 Articles of Religion. It wasn't the king who came up with this. It was his theologians who brought them together. Same thing with Dogma. It was a collaborative effort. And same thing with the Anabaptist theology. It was refined by many godly men. So I think when you have a person who presents their idea as the sole truth, like Ellen G. White or Joseph Smith or the guy who made Jehovah's Witnesses. Although Jehovah's Witnesses are kind of collaborative, they're still very cultish because there's no room for outside thought, which is a second thing. In these genuine articles, there's no real defined statement. There's an open-ended question that, maybe there's room around this. So you listen to the Augsburg Confession, it allows people to serve in the military, it allows people to hold public office, it talks about grace being our salvation instead of works. You look at the Anabaptist theology, it talks about moral purity, and it talks about, but it's not cultish. It's not, we're forcing you to do this. We're not the only way to be saved. We're not the sole interpreter. We're not the sole person. If you ever have a pastor too who thinks they're the sole interpreter, they're the ones who say either goes or stays. That's a cult. When you have that authority that's top down, not communicative, the authority comes from the top. These people are the great influencers, and it trickles down to the bottom, and there's no communication, and it's hard to define what true Christianity is. But I think one thing that separates it from false Christianity is the demand it places on the worshiper. So, Catholicism does not try to control every single thought that a Catholic has. There's many denominations within Catholicism, many different orders, there's many different sects of priests, there's many different sects of knights, which they still have knights. They serve a different role. There's many different sects of philosophies within the Catholic Church. Same thing with Lutherans. Now we know the false ones are those that publish sin, but we're not talking about sinful churches. We're speaking specifically of those that hold to moral purity. The ones that say, you follow my word and you do nothing else. Those are false churches. They don't let room for free thought. A perfect example is Thieleman Van Bracht wrote Martyr's Mirror. He has some very good theology, but he read the Aeneid. He read it. He would read Ovid. And the Aeneid's pretty salty, and so is the Ovid. Probably read Ovid. There was some. There's some like liberty people had. It wasn't just like this hyper dogmatic and rigid control over everything someone did. And that's what differs true religion from false religion, especially in Christianity, where they do have this moral purity. They want people to obey and honor God's law. But if they're sitting there saying like, you can't, do not touch, do not taste, that's a show of religion. That's will worship. Do not taste, do not touch. That's will worship. We know what is sin. Drunkenness is a sin. We know that profanity, being vulgar, is a sin. We know that bitterness and hard-heartedness and anger and disobedience to parents and putting in false reports, we know that's sin. But, reading Harry Potter, listening to classic rock and roll, drinking a shot of whiskey, probably not. And I think as life goes on, Christians have to realize, there's some spice to life, There's some spice. Spice is spice, It's not necessary in food, but it makes it taste better. And it's actually healthy for you, There's some things in life that you gotta experience. Okay, it doesn't mean go out and buy a prostitute. That doesn't mean go out and get slam-fisted drunk. That doesn't mean go out and smoke a bowl of marijuana. That doesn't mean go and cuss and say every profane word in the whole entire textbook. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that there's liberty in Christianity. Okay, there's not this my way or the highway. We're communicating with each other. We're having a conversation. We're not having a my way is right and your way is wrong. That's not Christianity. It's a conversation. I think the religion that I grew up with, when it was good, it was more of a conversation. It was not something that was forced on me. I had good conversation. I had good conversion. It's not something that says someone had to sit there and hide me from the world and keep me away from all the realities. That's not my life. You know, I didn't need to have rock and roll hidden from me, and I knew Britney Spears was bad because I just did. I had rock and roll. I knew there was something wrong with it. I knew there was something wrong with drugs because I just knew. I had something good to relate it to. You have to have good. You have to know good before you can know evil. You don't have to know. You can't know good if all you know is evil. Is another thing. If all you know is evil, you can't know good, but if you do know good, you will choose not to do evil. But you will fall away. There's the prodigal child. They take their inheritance and they spoil it. But then they come back to the father and they get hugged and kissed and he comes running to them, you know. So it's a very important thing that we understand this, that true religion is not rigid. In the Middle Ages, I'd say there was not a lot of true religion. It's not the religion that I would say was right. You know, putting people in cuffs and drowning witches and all this other nonsense. It doesn't seem to me like it was real religion. But that's not religion's fault. That's human behavior. We're having the same thing happen with what we call woke people. It's the same thing. It's not a religious problem. It's a human problem. Humans, they do this, and I think real people tend to avoid it. And I think real religion tends to avoid it too.